weather's getting warmer. Love to see it and feel it. And of course, with it comes a large increase in the number of bicyclists on West Michigan roadways. It's important for both riders and motorists to understand the rules of the road regarding bicyclists, not only to follow the law, but to prevent that car-bicycle crash that could happen. Now, unfortunately, the statistics in Michigan show an alarming number of deadly incidents involving cyclists every year. So it's a good idea to get a little education this morning from Grand Rapids personal injury lawyer Tom Sinus from Sinus Dramus Law Firm. Tom, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me back.
Absolutely. Let's start with the basic rules of the roads. You got cars, you got bikes. Are the rules the same?
Yes and no. Let's talk about the cars.
Okay.
What responsibilities do motorists have when it comes to bikes? And it is a great time to have this conversation because, of course, we live with this seemingly endless winter where we don't see cyclists on the road until all of a sudden when it gets warm.
Right.
So I think the most important rule for motorists is what I would call be aware and share.
Okay.
You have to be aware and on the lookout for cyclists, of course, all year round, but particularly now. Because why? Because cyclists do have a right to use the road. I know some people will say, well, isn't that what the bike lane is for? Sure, they can use the bike lane. Or can't they ride on the sidewalk? And maybe they can, yes. But that doesn't mean at the exclusion of the road. So they have the right to be on the roadway, which means you as a driver, me as a driver, has an obligation to keep an eye out for them. The second rule I think is most important for motorists has to do with passing, and there's been some changes in state law over the last 5, 6, 7 years. In 2018, the Michigan legislature, one of the last states to do this in the country, enacted a 3-foot passing rule, meaning that if you're going to pass a cyclist on whatever side of the cyclist, you have to give that cyclist at least 3 feet of room. But keep in mind that certain cities may have a broader ordinance. Grand Rapids is a great example. We have a 5-foot passing ordinance in the city of Grand Rapids. So whether you're thinking in terms of 3 feet, 5 feet, I think the takeaway here is to give room. You know, it's not legal to pass the cyclist buzzing right by their handlebars. So I think those are the most important rules for motorists when it comes to bikes.
Okay, so that's from the viewpoint of someone behind the wheel of the car. Know in your head, they have a right. Cyclists have a right to the road.
Yep.
All right, how about from the cyclist point of view? What do they need to know?
So it's kind of the same story. Yes, they have a right to use the road, but they also have an obligation to follow certain rules. Of course, many of the rules that apply to cars applies to cyclists, but there are a few unique ones to cyclists. For example, cyclists are required to ride as reasonably close to the right-hand curb as they can.
Okay.
There are 5 exceptions, things like turning left, maybe passing another cycle as an example, but riding as close to the curb as practicable is a requirement. Cyclists need to have lights during certain times of day. They need to use hand signals when they're making a left turn or a right turn. They have to have brakes that work. So, and these are not all of the rules, but some of the most basic rules. When it comes to sidewalks, the general idea is that state law permits cyclists to ride on sidewalks, but again, we have this dynamic here between state and local. There may be a local ordinance within your particular town that limits when or where cyclists can ride on the sidewalks.
Okay, so riding on the sidewalk might not necessarily just be a blanket. It's true for everybody.
It may not. It may not. This is where we get down into variations between municipalities.
So what happens then, Tom, if there's an accident, let's say involving a bike and a car, and you've got local ordinances, you've got state law. I mean, who sets the rules?
Okay, so on that instance, and this is really important, if there's an incident between a cycle and a car, this does not depend on ordinance. State law is uniform with this important concept. The important one being that if a cyclist is injured in an incident involving a motor vehicle, a car as you may think of, then the cyclist is entitled to recover automobile no-fault benefits, which you and I have talked about a lot over the years. Because most importantly, that includes coverage for medical expenses, and it also includes coverage for lost wages. Those are the 2 most important ones.
Sure.
And it is that involvement of a motor vehicle that entitles the cyclist to claim those no-fault benefits. Otherwise stated, if a cyclist crashes with another cycle, no motor vehicle, no fault. But if a cyclist is involved in an incident with a car, no fault benefits. That then brings up the important question of where does the cyclist get their no-fault benefits? Well, the first rule is they go to whoever insured their car. So even though you're on your motorcycle,
Yeah, I was gonna say.
you're drawing your no-fault benefits from your own auto insurer.
Okay.
All the more reason for cyclists to make an informed choice about how much no-fault coverage they're buying. You and I have talked a lot over the years that now people have choices. You can still choose a medical expense coverage that doesn't have an arbitrary limit, but you can also choose a whole lot less. This matters for cyclists because if they're involved in that incident with a motor vehicle, they're going to look first to their own auto insurance. If they don't have auto insurance, say they don't own a car and they just cycle to and from work and around town, they're still entitled to no-fault benefits, but they have to go through a process called the Michigan Assigned Claims Plan, a subject for a whole nother discussion.
Sure.
The most important part, though, for this is that when that happens, the cyclist's medical expense benefit is limited to $250,000. So cyclists here need to be aware of this concept because the minute there's an incident involving a motor vehicle, all of this comes into play.
And I'm sure a lot of information just got tossed to you watching this right now. So there's a quicker and easier way to have these questions answered, and that is the phenomenal website that you guys have. Or you can always give them a call too, 616-301-3333. Or if you have any questions about cyclist law, no-fault auto insurance law, or any of those pertaining to those topics, sinusdramus.com for more, or give them a visit in their office on Cherry Street right here in Grand Rapids.